Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to partner with MetaMed Marketing for this session on making your practice's website more impactful, patient-focused, which leads to more patients in your practice. I'm Matt Henson, Marketing Manager here at Ezderm. I'm very thrilled to introduce our speakers, Ali Kuros and Britt Cavender. They're the co-founders of MetaMed Marketing. Ali, he leads engineering and strategy at MetaMed. Before co-founding the company, he served as a general manager of a plastic surgery practice. So he truly understands kind of the day-to-day challenges of running a medical office, kind of combining that experience with decades of experience in SEO and SEM. You get someone who brings both that technical expertise and those real-world insights to every project that he does. He does oversee MetaMed's design, development, and research teams, all guided by their mission to help practices compete and win using data-driven strategies for their websites. So with that, I want to go ahead and dive in, and I'm going to turn it over to Ali to get us started.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank everyone for taking the time out of their lunch hours and coffee breaks to join us. Super thrilled to give this webinar in cooperation with Ezderm. Today, we're going to go right past website aesthetics and talk about what compels a person on a dermatology website to reach out and request a consultation. This is not about fluff or trends, but it's about truly aligning every interaction on your website toward your end business objective of new patient acquisition. Imagine you have just entered a beautifully appointed store, but there's nobody to greet you. The product you're looking for is nowhere in sight, and the layout of the store makes it difficult for you to even look for the product. This is the experience of a patient who lands on a dermatology website which is poorly designed. Now, I'm sure that everyone at this webinar has been through other seminars or talks where the speaker is passionately arguing for search engine optimization, SEO, and all that important stuff. And that stuff really is important. But let's not forget, we created your websites for people, for human beings with very short attention spans and frankly, high expectations. What we are going to talk about is how to guide those people from curiosity to commitment, from curiosity to consultation, through strategic layouts, persuasive content, and trust-building designs. Before I get into the how, I'd like to take a minute and share some stats in support of the why. Why is it important for us to engage the patient more than ever? 10 seconds is all an average person is going to give you on any website in order to find information they want to find. And even then, if we win them over in that first 10 seconds, we really have bought ourselves the next 10 seconds. We're just dealing in 10-second increments. In those 10 seconds, it's good to know that eye tracking studies show that the human eye tends to move on the page in a pattern consistent with the shape of the letter F. We try to use this, particularly on desktop formats, when we lay out key information on the page. And as we are consuming the content on the page, on average, we consume about 20 to 30% of content, written content on a page. So it's pretty safe to say that human beings scan web pages. We don't read them. Now, we're not advocating for you to run and cut the content on your website by 70 or 80%. Please don't do that. But we are advocating that content that is well thought out, well laid out, with a lot of attention to white space, and is clutter-free, as studies have shown, can increase attention span by about 20%. It's also important to discuss how we can get your websites to work harder to guide patients from curiosity to commitment. Consider that we can increase the conversion rate by as much as 34% on your websites when we strategically place call to action elements. These are contact forms. These are book a consultation forms, close to trust building elements, such as testimonials, such as before and afters, reviews, etc. And if that's done right, if a call to action exists in the right place, in the right format, studies show that the human eye focuses on it within 2.5 seconds. So we've got 2.5 seconds to capture the attention and guide folks down the path toward our objective. We also see a 70%, over 70% increase in attention to information above the fold. And just for those of us, as a reminder, above the fold means anything that's visible on the screen before the user has to start scrolling. And for those of us who love to collect a lot of information through our contact forums, please know that we can increase conversions by up to 50% if we keep the information we request through those forms brief. We recommend maximum 4 fields: name, email, phone number, maybe a field for request and consultation. When it comes to engagement, we don't advocate engagement for the sake of engagement. Websites that engage users get noticed by search engines, and therefore search engines send more people to websites that do better at engagement. This creates a self-sustaining reaction that is hardwired into every modern search engine. And if you think about it, the work of creating a website that is engaging, captivates your audience, gives good, useful information in the right format at the right places, is almost like passive income. You do this one time, but search engines notice and they keep sending you new patients. And we want you to take advantage of this. We have talked a little bit about engagement so far. And if somebody catches me, in an elevator and asks me as a marketer, what's engagement, I'll start to throw out terms like session duration, scroll depth, time on page, bounce rate, and they might sound very impressive. But we think as marketers, it's very important for us to keep in mind what engagement is in human terms. I believe we're talking about the human nature when we talk about engagement. Consider that anyone who lands on a dermatology website, even though in their own mind they might feel like they're casually browsing the page, they have actually entered a well-documented subconscious psychological decision-making journey. This is a sequence that starts with awareness. Might be aware realization of a cosmetic concern. It might be that they came across a new treatment they're curious about. And from there, they enter the consideration stage, where they narrow down the options, they compare options, they might look at before and after, they might consider reviews, etc. And if they're happy with all that information, they get closer to the commitment stage. This is when they reach out, they DM you, they might book themselves in for a consultation. We go through this decision-making sequence hundreds of times a day, whether we're looking for an aesthetic provider, whether we are looking to buy an iPhone case on Amazon, or even if we're picking an apple from the bunch at the grocery store. Connecting with folks when they're in this decision-making sequence is the foundation of all marketing. So the way we like to think of it is, when somebody lands on a dermatology website, we have a golden opportunity because we have them in this sequence. So we will do ourselves a great favor by laying our content out in a way that matches up this mindset. So far, great. We can talk the talk. But the question, the hard part, is how do we leverage this information to create blueprints that actually guide patients down the path toward commitment? Let's take a patient and follow them through the pages of your website and map their mindset to what they see on the screen at each stage of this decision-making process. So on your homepage, it's often the first impression. It's certainly most often the place where folks are get the first in-depth introduction to your practice, to your providers. We are looking for immediate engagement. This is our first 10 seconds, the first impression. We're looking to provide very strong visual anchors. We are looking to, in an uncluttered way, present pathways toward the end outcome that we are looking for. We have doorways to providing social proof. We have different ways of reaching out and contacting the practice. Human face, by the way, statistically shown to be very, very effective at capturing our attention. So we want to take advantage of this. What I love about this particular image is you have the human face who's, this woman is looking at themselves in the mirror. So I think that's very apt in our industry, looking in the mirror, but then through the mirror, they're looking back at you. So if we can get creative with imagery instead of picking a pretty stock photography, we certainly think that will help capture the attention. We can take things a step further. I love this video introduction. It does all the same things. However, it immediately humanizes the practice. And in 2025, marketing is all about authenticity. So if we can take advantage of this, we certainly want to see that. And how else can we make ourselves more authentic than by putting our face front and center? Builds immediate credibility. Then, past the awareness stage, if the patient gets through to consideration, what they're really looking for is to validate their decision to stay on your website. They're looking a little bit deeper. They look at your services. They look at credentials. Again, uncluttered. There are clear channels where we can guide folks toward where they can find a specific product they're looking for. We want to introduce ourselves. We want to introduce our providers. We love personal images that show personal connection. This is followed by some trust builder, credentialing our providers. And in this case, we could even take things further. We have an interactive feature that segments available treatments at this practice by age groups. This, again, immediate interactive engagement. Trust builders in the form of testimonials. In this case, again, notice it's very easy for the eye to focus, and it's very uncluttered, a lot of negative space. And finally, if we've done all of that, then we have earned the right for you as website builders and designers to ask for that commitment. And we want to do that in a clear way. We have different ways for folks to contact you. We highly recommend incorporating online booking features. And I can tell you firsthand, when we see online booking features implemented into websites, they immediately rise to be the most used, the most engaged with of all the other lead capture funnels that we see on websites. Now, as a dermatology website, all the pages on your website are not copies of each other. It's not a homogeneous resource. Let's keep going and look at a few different key page types that are on a typical dermatology website. Photo gallery is very important. We often see photo galleries in the top 3 most highly trafficked pages of any website. In the case of your photo gallery, the journey is the same. The human psychology doesn't change by what we're looking at on the page. We're always going through this awareness, consideration, commitment process. But on the photo gallery, on a dermatology before and after photo gallery, it is all about relating to the patient. This is where folks have a chance, if the photo gallery does its job right, to relate, to imagine their own transformation, and to really believe in the possibility of what you can do for them. In the consideration stage, what we'd like to show is is an immediate screenshot of your entire body of work. This is kind of that first sanity check where folks want to make sure that you can actually do what you say you can do. And this leads us to the consideration stage where it's all about self-identification. Photo galleries have this amazing power to create emotional buy-in. And we can do that through having in-depth case descriptions that match conditions and circumstances of one patient to a case on your gallery. So if we have galleries, we'd like to have information. If you come onto this case, for example, and you're around the same age, same gender, same height and weight, and you have the same problems, in this case, this person lost a lot of weight and noticed the sagging face. If you are a prospect and you come onto this page and you can relate and identify with this case, the job is half as done. We have definitely earned the right to ask for that commitment, which again, it's going to be in an uncluttered way, few fields in a contact form in this case, and different ways of contacting the practice through text or email. On your bio pages, we believe bio pages are about making connections. When a patient lands on a bio page, yes, they want to see your hard qualifications. This is an immediate awareness stage. They're looking to vet the professionals. They want to know academic memberships, et cetera, et cetera. But in the consideration stage, and this is an example, by the way, of doing exactly that. And I love the way we have set this up in a magazine style, a lot of white space. The qualifications of Dr. Waldorf jump right off the page here. Very uncluttered, easy for the eye to focus on. And as we guide folks down to the consideration phase, they're looking to validate the fit with the provider. Yes, you have the right qualifications, but be focused on the areas that is important to them. How many years you've had in practice? An example of that further down the same page, we have some additional trust builders, and we have areas of focus for Dr. Waldorf that, again, clearly jump off the page. From there, folks are going to look for trust builders. Remember, we talked about authenticity. This is where before and after testimonials, reviews come in, and we want to take advantage. In this case, Dr. Waldorf is relying on her reviews to convey trust and credibility. And the last step in the consideration stage is something that we often see maybe overlooked a little bit, and that's making a personal connection. We love for our doctors to talk about why they got in this field in the first place. We want you to talk about your passion, your vision, your principles. Your patients want to know you have principles and you have strong reasons for wanting to help them. Dr. Waldorf, in this case, a basic quote talking about her passion to empowering the patient and her privilege to be part of their journey. This doesn't have to be loud, doesn't have to be ostentatious, but it does have to come off the page, and it does need to be very strong and personal. And this can be done in a number of different ways, videos, other formats. And again, if we've done all of this, we have earned you the right to ask for a commitment, done in a way that's uncluttered, clear, easy to follow. And finally, procedural pages. We like to think of your procedural pages, like Botox page or fillers or cool sculpting, whatever the procedure might be. We like to think of them as problem solvers. Just about anybody who lands on your procedural pages has a problem that they want to fix. In this case, we think it's a good idea to echo those. And the way we do that, we echo them by saying, we understand your concerns. Here's a list of conditions that this page is all about. If you can, provide aspirational results so they can see a problem next to a potential solution. In this case, Dr. Turner's talking about crow's feet and neck bends, which is the focus of a lot of her toxins practice. In the consideration phase, it's about the solution. Fine, you understand the patient's problem. That's great. What can you do for them? There are many different modalities that that can handle different conditions. What do you provide? In this section, we want to focus on procedure benefit feature blocks. FAQs are a great way to give quick and easy to access information for users. As we said, the content needs to be skimmable. So the layout is really important. Use of FAQs, use of comparison blocks, and anything else that can condense information. And of course, the tone. We find conversational tone works best to engage the user. And here's an example in this case, FAQs with relatively short answers and questions that jump right off the page because that is what the users is looking to find. Oh, and here's an example of doing basically the same thing, but in an interactive visual format. So in this feature block, the user can move the mouse around and have possible treatment areas pop up relative to a Botox treatment. There are many different ways of doing this, but the idea is engagement. The user is much more likely to engage with a website that provides something interactive than one that just provides text. And of course, trust builder, same idea, authenticity, before and after testimonials, reviews. In this case, Dr. Turner's has chosen to focus on her credentials as trust builders, but I think further down the page, there are reviews as well on that page. And finally, again, if we have done all of this right on your behalf, we have earned you the right to ask for commitment. And again, we provide that in a way that is very customized to the design, but is uncluttered, use of white space, very clear channel and multiple channels to give the user whatever way they prefer to contact the practice. In conclusion, I guess what is most important is think of your website as a first consultation, and think of the layout and the design and the content as your best salespeople who are there to speak on your behalf when you're not there to speak for yourself. And take the time to think through the layout before we actually put pen to paper on your design. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and for investing your time with us. We appreciate it. I hope we've given you some information that's fresh and maybe inspires to take a second look at your websites and create fantastic web experiences.
Thanks for taking us through that, Ali. I really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot of really good best practices here and everything like that. I do want to go ahead and open it up for questions. And I do see a few kind of already in the queue. So we'll go ahead and kind of get started with questions and answers. Question here is there kind of a best practice on how much content should be on like a web page?
That's a fantastic question. And there is always a tug of war between content volume and user experience. Human beings, as we said, we want to find the answer very quickly. And that's all we care about. Search engines, unfortunately, have complicated this because they say, if you really know what you're talking about, if we are to trust your authority on the topic, we want to see a lot of original in-depth content on your page. So the best practice from a human perspective is give quick, short answers. The best practice from a search engine perspective is to give long, in-depth answers. And the challenge, therefore, is in a development ideology that knows how to balance those. And the way we do that is by laying out the content and essentially designing what we want the page to look like first, because there's no sense for us to give you pages that users love, but search engines don't send anyone to. So I would say this is one of those areas where a good web development professional can walk a tightrope.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Ali, you said that beautifully. We have found some tricks and tactics where we can make lots of volume really appear much more consumable, much more digestible, so that it doesn't intimidate people, but at the same time, it really attracts the attention and the authority of search engines. So yes, good point. Good question.
I think those are awesome points that you brought up, and I think it really leads into our next question here, talking about AI. So this question is: does using AI to help me write my website like hurt or help how Google views like the trustworthiness of my website or the pages?
Oh, another great question. We could have a webinar on that one alone, but I'll
Just another
say,
hour.
Yeah.
very quickly, yes and no. And I'll, if you bear with me, I'll just go into a little bit of it and maybe more involved or in-depth answer. This is a multifaceted topic to consider. On the one hand, yes, using AI is going to cut down your work by a lot. On the other hand, if it's so easy to do, you can bet everybody else is doing it. And then if you fast forward in time, you now are at a point where everything is sounding the same. And as folks who've been playing with AI for long before it was in the news, I can tell you that once you've looked at them enough, you start to see a pattern. And you can be sure that Google's algorithm will find the same pattern. So then Google's in the same place where he says, there's a sea of similar sounding stuff. I have to find the original stuff. And then they kind of ignore, or worse, start to penalize folks who've just been spamming the AI button. So what we think works best is use AI for ideation, use it maybe for to lay out the content, but then it has to be humanized. It has to sound like you, and you have to be aware of potential downsides of it, and try to, as much as you can, build insurance to make sure that when and if search engines say, okay, this has been abused, like it was with link building many years ago, you don't want your website to go down overnight because all the content is AI generated.
I
Yeah.
think you're saying, Ali, that hey, we never know when Google or other search engines are going to make a decision that in the intent of having the best content, the best answers available for searchers, they're going to make some major algorithm change. And and I think you'll agree, Ali, that search engines do recognize AI generated content. We don't know the day when they might go, oh, this entire website was generated from AI. They didn't really edit it enough to be more human. So now suddenly they're going to drop a lot in ranking. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Brent. Yeah, that's absolutely what I'm saying is it really does need to be taken judiciously and with an eye toward not just today and tomorrow and offloading some writing work, but also down the line, just in terms of the viability of an entire website.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Ali, and I appreciate the points that you made there. I think it's important to kind of understand, and I think you touched on this, finding that fine line between, utilizing AI to that, but also establishing that human connection that people are really looking for in building like your trustworthiness, like as a provider. So I think that's really great. Got another question here, and I think this is really interesting, and we didn't touch on this at all. It says, does mobile website design matter more than designing a website for like a desktop application? Just curious about your thoughts as people are using like a cell phone or a tablet when browsing the internet more than just like a desktop computer.
I don't know if I would say it matters more, but I would definitely say that it matters a great deal. If you look at the stats, we are now at a point where the majority of the traffic is coming from mobile devices, certainly for many of the sites. So it's very, very important to almost look at your mobile design as its own layout. However, I wouldn't say it's more important at desktop. There are a lot of nuances that come into play. Let's say if when it comes to facelift, where generally you might have folks who are a little bit older looking for solutions, they might be more likely to be on desktop. So it's not a really a homogeneous type of a thing. But certainly you need to have a very, very strong focus on mobile because that's what the data is telling us.
Yeah. And we got another question kind of along the same lines here, and I think you maybe answered a little bit of this, but we'll ask this just to get a little bit more in depth. It says, do you find that users accessing websites more frequently via smartphone versus laptop computer? If so, do you kind of start your design process thinking about how much smaller a phone or a tablet screen is and how much content is shown like on that? Seems like a completely different process than designing it for desktop. Does that seem to kind of be the case?
It is. As I said, we really look at them as almost two separate entities, and in the way in which we lay out information. Just to give you an example, if you have a number of feature blocks, let's say photo gallery feature block, a doctor feature block, and then some content, the order and the format of each of those are designed separately for different devices. So same feature block is going to look one way on a mobile device and a totally different way in terms of how it's presented on a desktop device. In terms of the first question is actually an interesting question. Do people visit websites more often on mobile devices? I don't have an answer for you for that one right off the top of my head, but I do think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you kind of touched on it, after the first question. I think age does maybe play a factor in that. Like, I think people that are younger are more adept or more used to using a mobile type device to search than a desktop device. So, I think maybe that also maybe kind of lends into, what's the demographic of your office, right? Are we looking at, you serving more older patients or, kind of serving that younger crowd? So glad we kind of answered that. Got another one here. In terms of the best site or the best hosting site for creating or hosting your website, like, is Squarespace better? Is WordPress better? We've seen some Shopify sites too. Is there a gold standard maybe for hosting my practice website to use, or are all of these tools like Squarespace or WordPress, about the same in terms of how those are designed? Or
So another really good question. So nowadays, with the majority of internet being built on WordPress, we have some very good um, flushed out solutions for WordPress hosting. What we often recommend, just as a general principle, is we want our practices to completely own all of their own properties, all their own profiles, be able to move away from their host anytime they want, or from the marketing vendor for that matter. We want you to be completely autonomous, where your marketing vendor and your host are plugged into you, and when you're done with them, there is no drama or hassle to move on.
right.
What now, there are solutions for WordPress, obviously. For all the other ones that you mentioned, the process of taking the website from, let's say, Squarespace, and now easily mounting that on another host is not possible. Squarespace has its own hosting environment. The files they provide you, if they provide you any files, can't really be used anywhere else. So what I would say is, for the ease of use and ease of transferring, stick with WordPress. We recommend currently a couple of different WordPress, mainly one WordPress hosting option. What I will say with WordPress is this, or with any other hosting environment. Today, website security is SEO. And what we see with WordPress, because of its ubiquitous use, it has a huge bullseye on its back. If you figure out a WordPress vulnerability, all of a sudden, 65% of websites in the world are targets to you. So that's the downside. What that means is that you need to have a vendor who is minding the performance and security of your website, at least monitoring what's happening, and if not preventing breaches outright, that they can at least be aware when breaches happen and then respond with resources necessary to combat that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Matt, quick follow-on question for Ali. You talked, Ali, about let's just say the mobility of a practice to be able to move away from one host or one platform. What about where would you rank using something like a Squarespace or Wix or some of those for the ability to deploy promotional tactics in the website so that you're always building signals to search engines, which is obviously a very important part of what companies like ours will do.
Absolutely. I would rank it lower as well, Brent. In general, we don't have as much flexibility with the Squarespaces of the world or Wix, where they're very, self-contained type of an account or environment. We don't have access under the hood. That's good if you're, for kind of a DIY type of a, user, or even small vendors. That's good because a lot of stuff was provided for you. But as an analogy, if you're a very experienced mechanic, you're not afraid of what's under the hood. You would rather have direct access to make the performance as tuned as to your own specifications as you like. So you lose some additional power or capability to fine tune things because you don't have access to the full picture under the engine or under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good, and I like that. I think it is tough when you're kind of locked down to like a Wix website and those templates that brings. I think that is a really good point to bring up. Another kind of question here around those lines. This practice seems that they're using just a Facebook page kind of as their de facto website. You know, what's maybe the connections or kind of the pros and cons of having like a really good social presence like on your Facebook or your Instagram versus having like a beautifully designed website?
That's also a great question, and it's I think it's a nice segue from the previous. Same idea applies. You don't have access to Facebook's systems the way you would have access to your own hosting environment. So you're limited in what you can do. And nowadays, with the sophistication that's required to get, let's say, a dermatology website ranked in tougher markets, that is simply not enough. You don't have control over a lot of the environmental variables that you need control over in order to fine tune the performance of the website. The other thing I'll say is this, and this any one of us can attest to this. I have never done a search for any competitive or even not competitive term and have a Facebook website come up anywhere near the top, even 5 pages. So
Yeah,
they just don't get ranked.
yeah. Another one here, and this kind of goes along with this. I'm just starting out with my practice. What would you say is the most important page to focus on my website?
That's a good one.
That is a good
It's a good
question.
one because it's tough to answer.
Hey, Ali, while you're thinking about that, I want to go back to the last question about social media. Just make one last point, please. Listen, social media is vital to get your brand out there, and it engages people. It's excellent for that point. But really, your website is a hub around which all of these other peripheral channels will come in. So just think about somebody that finds you on social media. Aren't they going to want to validate the doctor's credentials? Aren't they going to want to know what other services you provide? Aren't they going to want to maybe know where you're located? What are your hours? There's so many other ways that a website will validate a practice. And so the bottom line is you don't have somebody pointing a gun at your head and saying, hey, you have to do one or you have to do the other. You really should have a very full foundational website with all of your procedures, all your validation, all of your before and afters, and other accoutrements, right? But within that ecosystem, you can also have the appropriate channels that are pointing into the website, and frankly, the website is pointing out to them. And Matt, this goes back to something you said earlier. You have to have some vision about what your audience is, and in that audience, you wouldn't have a TikTok page be your main priority if you were, working with people that were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, right? That
Yeah.
kind of. So you really have to have a more holistic and more whole systems view and impression before you decide what these channels are. Really good planning for these kinds of things, being strategic ahead of time, really, really saves practices a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's actually the idea of the holistic angle is a good segue to answer the question you had brought up, Matt, in that back in the day you could pick one page on a website, say, you know what, I only care about Botox, I don't care about any other treatment, or I only care about ZMN or whatever your preferred toxin is, and just focus on that, and that one page would get ranked on an otherwise mediocre website. Those days are gone. Google is not going to rank you for a page if they don't like the rest of the website. So what I would say, if you are starting at, what you want to focus on is decide what are the main 4 or 5 or few things that are important to you, and instead of having a website that has 50 procedures, focus on a website that has fewer pages, but then each of those pages have to be very in depth and answer a lot of questions. You still need to have a before and after, and some of the other trust builders on the website. But that's that in general. That's the way I would answer that question.
Okay. Awesome.
And
Well,
Matt, real quick,
go ahead.
one last real quick point. You'll recall from our SEO discussion that a very foundationally strong website will be architected properly. It will have the right content in it, and it will have the right messages around it that are coming in and are validating the authority of the organization and the website itself. Right.
Yeah. Very good point. This is kind of a callback, and this isn't a question, but it leads into a question from the same attendee here. They said from ChatGTP, as of 2024 through 2025 data, over 65 to 75% of all traffic to healthcare provider websites, including dermatology practices, comes from smartphones. So I think we've kind of talked about the searchability and the design on smartphones. So here was kind of their follow-up question to just pointing kind of some of that data out. And I appreciate you pointing that out to us, because I think it's a really good point to make. So their question on that is, shouldn't the design process start from that like smartphone or tablet like type environment and optimize that rather than adapt from like a monitor or like a desktop version? What are kind of your thoughts on that?
So it's a great question. I think maybe maybe it has to do with the mechanics of creating the website. When we don't, the mobile first is a concept. It is not a workflow. In other words, you don't start from desktop and then the create the mobile within the constraints of what your desktop says. So we're not think of mobile first as a concept. The point is, you have to have a mobile website that lays out information in the right sequence and the right way, so that it's presentable and configured for the smaller type of screen. So yes, as a concept, mobile first is very key, but in practice, whichever one you start with, in a chronological sequence, you still have to give the other versions the same due and respect as the one you started with.
And Matt, one thing we have seen a lot is there are some vendors out there, they're cutting corners, and you get a nice desktop version and you get a workable mobile solution. But hey, what about tablets and laptops and everything in between? So a solid provider is going to be creating website design and layout so that it is functional and elegant all through that spectrum, whether it's a mini tablet, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a 22 or 26 or 28-inch monitor, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting to think about, just how how websites can be consumed and what it looks like across the board, right? Sitting here at my desk, I've got 3 different monitors and a couple of them are bigger than the others. So really understanding how it plays out across the spectrum of how a patient or prospective patient might access that information is a really good point to really, I think what you're saying is trying to kind of blend that, across the board. So it's a workable, functioning, beautiful website across the board, right?
No matter what size monitor the person is looking at it on. And just kind of a side note too, Matt. Years back, there was a study done, and this was a while back for sure, but there was a study done that the majority of elective healthcare websites were being reviewed between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. What were those people? What were they supposed to be doing during that time frame? They were
Right.
at work. And if they were looking at websites during that time at work, is it more likely that they were looking on their mobile phones, or more likely that they were looking at a monitor? And so
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make too. One last question here in the queue, and we'll ask this. I kind of feel like that maybe this is a little bit of a loaded question, but we'll ask this. We'll see if any other questions come in, and then we'll go ahead and conclude. But again, I think this is a loaded question, but I think it's a great question. It says, "What's the biggest mistake you see dermatology's practices make with their website design?" And I think that's a loaded question. I think there's tons of answers, but I'll let you guys, dive into that.
Well, that's a great question. And, I may be a little bit guilty of a kind of answering this with a bit of a sense of recency. But what we talked about the importance of focus on the experience of the user. And, for so many years, it was SEO this, SEO that all the time, everywhere. And I think that's all right. But the pendulum swung to a way that to a direction where user experience became almost secondary or an afterthought.
Mhm.
What we are advocating, to be quite frank, can't be mounted in a week or even a month. So to us, a mistake is to prioritize speed. You're better off to take 2 additional months to do this the right way, because you're going to have your website for 5 or 10 years before you redesign it, than say, hey, these guys tell me they'll have me up by by the 4th of July, and I'm going to go that way. And we see this time and again. We see websites that come up, and sometimes, frankly, in business, we bid for and we lost because of that reason. But then we go and we look at what came up. We say, well, if that's what you wanted, we could have done that for you in a week.
yeah. Actually, Matt, I collect these answers for this because in my 15 plus years of being in this industry segment and talking to so many practices, our organization has assessed about 800 websites in our 13 years. I see the biggest mistake is putting the design or how the website looks over how the website works. And the reality of it is, nobody is forcing you to do one or the other. You can have both. You can have an elegantly designed custom website that is gorgeous, that is also fully functional for SEO, for conversion, for usability, and even for tracking the performance. That's the one of the biggest mistakes I make. People just get too fixated on the design at the expense of the functionality. But the other one I see, and this one drives me crazy, and that's why I'm so animated about this, they get their friends or their family to build them a website on the cheap as a favor to their friend or their family, and they don't look at the return on investment. If they had worked with professionals where they would have been making hundreds of thousands of dollars or even $1 million a year more from a thoughtful, thorough, complete, functionally sound and elegant website. It's just shocking to me how people, they don't think about the long-term return on their investment of working with friends and family for a professional website. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox about that. I'm really glad that this person asked that question.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe one way to think about it too, and maybe this is just how I think about it too. Like, I visit a lot of dermatology practices, and there are a lot of beautiful lobbies and beautiful buildings and things like that that obviously took a great amount of time to build that building or to craft that aesthetic in terms of like the interior design. Like, why wouldn't you want your website to match that look and feel that you've got like in person when someone walks in your door, right?
Absolutely, and a website is so affordable compared to the facilities, personnel, equipment. Those things you have major control over them. They can show up immediately or be completed, within some time frame. But if you don't have the demand that a productive website will drive in patients, it doesn't matter. You
Right.
invest all that money in all these other things, but yes, it's crazy to us to observe this after so many years of search engine optimization and productive website design and development being out there.
Absolutely. I don't see any more questions coming in, and we are almost at the top of the hour here for our webinar. So I do want to go ahead and put a pin in it, and we'll end the webinar for today. To our attendees, I want to thank you for taking the time today to attend the webinar. We appreciate it. We really know your time is valuable, and we just want to thank you for hanging out with us today. And just to you, Brent and Ali, just a huge thank you for putting this together and really presenting this and being thoughtful about it. Again, thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.